The theme for this year's topics have been contemporary challenges facing today's Christians. In the first class, we introduced the theme and we spoke about some of the different challenges that we have. And by definition, when I say contemporary, I'm talking about things that are relative to the time that we live. The day that we live in now, we experience some challenges today that generations past didn't have to deal with. In every generation, in every era of the lost church, since the beginning, the church has always had challenges, that were specific to the era that they lived in. And so we're talking about this year, some of the challenges that we face today, as Christians. In the last class, we talked about uh, Christians in today's political environment. We spoke about the hot mess that is our political environment today and what our responsibility as Christians are in this environment. We spoke about the fact that God ordained civil government and he instructed his people to be obedient to civil government. We went through all of that stuff, and as much as we dislike some of the people in positions of power, as long as they don't violate God's law, as long as it's not a question of obeying God rather than man or man rather than God, we ought to obey them. We ought to respect the position because in his wisdom, he set up civil government. So he knows what's best and how things should work, right?
Yeah.
Think if I can get you to read the introduction for me.
Sure. Today's world is filled with toxins from the air we breathe to the foods we eat. Environmental toxins are everywhere. Not only in a physical sense are we exposed to toxins, but also mentally and spiritually. Many of the forms of entertainment we feast upon are toxic: movies, television, music, etc. These forms of entertainment all have a huge impact on our character and shape who we are and how we respond to life's circumstances. Keep going. The question on the floor is, how do we remain holy, sanctified, set apart, and pure in the midst of the toxic, poison environment we live in? In this study, we will investigate that question. We will discuss some of the toxins we are exposed to, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and examine the scriptures for God's guidance in navigating these toxins.
Thank you. There are several realities that we must constantly be aware of. One, as Christians, we are in the world, but not of the world. And because we are in the world and not of the world hates us. Jesus said that in John chapter 17, verses 14 through 16. He spoke about how, the world will hate us because we are not of the world. I'm reminded of a story. I heard a story years ago of a man who was lost in the woods. And as he was trying to, make his way through the woods, trying to find the path, he came across a cesspool. How many of you know what a cesspool is?
We all know.
Who does not know what a cesspool is?
Yeah.
And that cesspool was giving off a foul stench. I mean, it was just, nasty smelling. But the man noticed in the middle of the cesspool was a flower growing, and it was a lily. And as he got closer to the cesspool, the scent from the lily was giving off a sweet fragrance. In the midst of all of the stench of this cesspool was a lily growing, and it was giving off this sweet aroma. And when he got to the cesspool, he asked the lily. I know people don't usually talk to lilies, but in this story, the man asked the lily, Lily, what are you doing growing in the middle of a cesspool? How could you survive in the middle of a cesspool? And the lily said, well, in order for you to understand how I can survive in this mess, you need to understand how I'm made. My roots go down below this mess, and my head rises above this mess. Therefore, I'm in this mess, but I'm not a part of this mess. That's what we are in the world. As Christians, we are lilies in the midst of a cesspool because this world is filled with all kind of filth, sin and every ungodliness. But we, in the midst of this cesspool, that we call the world. How do we do it? We have to stay rooted and grounded in God's word. And we have to set our affections on things above and not on things on the earth. We have to have our heads above this mess. We have to have our roots below this mess. And that's how we can survive being in this mess and still give off, a fragrance that's sweet in the nostril of God. Sis, you okay?
That is a good analogy, what you just said. But
I
that's
heard
true.
that 40 years ago. I
Yeah.
never forgot
That's-
it.
that's
Stayed with
good.
you.
Huh?
It stayed with you.
Yeah, it
It's all
does.
about where
It
your
stayed
roots
with
are.
me. It stayed with me all these because it's so relevant.
It is. It
You
really
can
is.
actually apply that. You can see the relevance of it on the realities that we must constantly be aware of. We are disciples, followers, imitators of Christ, and that comes with a cost. Someone get Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 through 26. Remember in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus said that if you love father or mother more than me, you're not worthy to be my disciple.
That's right.
If you love your sister, your brother, your son, your daughter, your wife, more than me, you're not worthy to be my disciples. And then he said, for a man's foes shall be they of his own household. That mother would be against the daughter, and the father against the son. In other words, there would be turmoil in the household because of me. But if you don't choose me, you're not worthy to be my disciple. That's heavy. I call from
10:32.
Matthew chapter 16,
Oh, 16?
but I was just quoting from Matthew chapter
Oh.
10. It's on there. I just didn't want to read it all. I was just telling you what Matthew 10 was
Yeah,
saying.
was
You can
saying.
read it later, but for the sake of time, I just want to quote read a couple. Matthew 16 verses 24 through 26 says what? Who has it?
Right here. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. But what profit is it if a man gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What will a man give in exchange for his soul?
Did you hear what he said?
Yeah.
If any man comes after me and doesn't deny himself, you have a big problem with that.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the biggest problems in the world.
Right.
People looking out for self. People putting self first. But Jesus said, if you're going to be my disciple, you have to deny yourself. That's not easy. That is not easy. Take up your cross. What does the cross represent?
Suffering.
Suffering,
Yeah, all the time.
sacrifice,
Yeah.
pain, love. It entails all of that. But you must be willing to pay that price. Deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. Following Jesus is not always easy.
No.
Oh, we sit in the building and we talk about, oh, I love Jesus. But sometimes when you get out there in the world and you face with some situations, following Jesus is not easy to do. Matter of fact, following Jesus can cost you your life in certain situations. Question on the floor is, are you willing to pay that price? Because Jesus said back in Matthew chapter 10, if you save your life, you lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you save it. You see? It's powerful. And it's not just lip, it's not just talk. This is stuff we need to think about. We need to marinate on some of this stuff. Because that's what makes us lilies in the midst of this cesspool. There was
I'm whatever you want me to be.
a school shooting in early 2000. And these guys were in the school, had these students lined up against the wall, and he was asking them, are you a Christian? Those who answered yes, he shot them and killed them right there. Here, in the United States, 2000. In certain parts of the world, I mean, yeah, you get stoned to death, you have your head cut off. But in the United States, but here's the point: regardless of where it is, geography, that's irrelevant. The issue is, if you are faced with that situation,
Would you be?
what will you answer to that question?
brave
If someone put a gun to your head and said, and asked, "Are you a Christian?" And if your answer was yes, I'm going to pull this trigger, what would you do? That's the issue. This is what Jesus is talking about. Are you willing to die for my sake? Before I move on to C, in 1 Peter chapter 2, Jesus modeled everything. When I say the disciple is an imitator, a follower of Christ, everything Jesus expects us to do, he modeled it. How to be forgiving, he modeled it. How to handle someone who betrayed you, he modeled it. How to handle people who persecute you, who kill you, he modeled it all. So we just have to look at the life that he lived and try to make our lives line up with his life, right? First Peter 4 verses 12 through 16, Peter talks about that we need to have the mindset that as Christ suffered, we need to prepare our mind that we will suffer. We have to wrap our mind around these things. C, on the realities that we must be constantly aware of. Our stewardship involves management of self, that is our temperament, time, and our talent, and our substance, the things that we have and the treasures that we have. You remember in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, Jesus said that lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where rust do corrupt and thieves break through and steal, but rather lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Here's the principle: for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You want to find out what's important to a person? Look at where they spend their money. Look at what they do with their treasure. And that'll tell you where their heart is. I remember a guy on the railroad years ago. This dude was so in love with his car, you couldn't touch his car. You got in his car, you have to take your shoes off. He just was, that's where his treasure was. Everything was about his car, you know what I mean? And people like that with their clothes, they like that with their family, they like that with, different people have different things. You know what God calls that? Idolatry. Anything that you put above him is idolatry, by definition. We have people who have education as their God. Some people have success, have money, have power, have all of these things that they have placed above God. God is a jealous God. He doesn't want anything or anyone to be above him. Now, and this is what we were talking about earlier in the note. 2 indicators of our discipleship are A, how well we imitate our master, that is Christ, and B, how well we manage what the master has given us, our life. Think about that. And what I want you to do is, when you go home or throughout this next week, I want you to be mindful of how you deal with situations that come up this week. Think about what your first mind tells you, how your first mind tells you to respond to it, and think whether or not Christ would respond to it that way. Think about what you do with your time this next week. All of these things has to do with our stewardship. Stewardship, by definition, is the management of something that belongs to someone else, but you are manager of it. Our lives are not ours. They belong to God. Everything we have is not ours. It belongs to God. We are managing it, and we will have to give an account to God as to how we have managed it, even our lives. And that's why we're going to get into some specifics about this thing, about the toxic environment that we live in, because I want you to see, and I want you to consider our lives and our management of those lives Okay. Note, our discipleship is not judged by how faithfully we attend worship services. That's what I was talking about earlier, or Bible classes. Our discipleship is measured by how well our lives imitate the life of Christ. Now, let's get into the topic. Toxins that we are exposed to. Physical toxins: air, water, food, electromagnetic fields. A. The air, water, and food we consume are full of toxins and unhealthy things that makes us sick. In our food today, we have genetically modified food. We have all kind of chemicals and preservatives in foods that we eat today, and it's making people sick. Generations past didn't have to deal with these things because they didn't have a lot of this stuff in generations past when people grew their own food and raised their own chickens and cows and stuff like that. B, we must educate ourselves on the dangers that exist in these areas and be mindful of what we expose our bodies, our temples to. I have done a lot of research the past few years on health and wellness and some of the toxins that exist in our food and our water and air. You have no idea how much stuff we are exposed to. How many of you have a cell phone,
We all
computer,
do. Everybody do.
routers, for the computer, for the internet connection? All of these things emit electromagnetic radiation and stuff like that. All of these things are detrimental to our health. There have been numerous studies done to show the dangers of cell phone, the radiation from cell phones, and the damage that it causes people's physical health. Foods that we eat, processed foods, and a lot of stuff that we eat. I see you, Rob. All of the stuff in the air that we breathe. All of these things are detrimental to our bodies. And I've had to make a whole lot of adjustments in my own personal life with regard to food and health and wellness. Because a few years ago, when I was at Trinity Gardens, 2000, when I left there, well, in 2013, 14, 15, I was a lot sicker than I looked. I didn't look sick, but I had a whole lot of health issues. I had an enlarged heart. I had food allergies. I kept breaking out. And the last one I had in October of 2015 almost cost me my life. I broke out in severe reaction food allergy, and I swole up real bad. I went to anaphylactic shock. I was in the tub with some Aveeno bath, the Aveeno oatmeal bath. I was in there. I was shivering in the waters. And when I got up to get out of the water, Allison said my eyes rolled back in my head. I was sitting on the edge of the tub because I had gotten so weak. I was stood up and I was too weak to stand up. I sat down on the edge of the tub. Allison said my eye rolled in the back of my head and I was falling back in the water. And if she hadn't caught me and pulled me down, to fall in front of the tub instead of back in the tub, I would have drowned. That was the turning point for me. That was the point that I realized I needed to do something about it. I went to the VA. I asked the VA, the head of the department that deals with allergies, I asked him point blank. I said, doctor, because I've been going back and forth to emergency rooms. I kept breaking out and going back to emergency rooms. And I asked him, I said, I keep having these severe reactions. I said, and I keep taking these things that, that treat the symptoms. I said, but I need to know what's the root cause. This man looked me in my eye and he told me, he said, Mr. Smith, to be honest with you, we don't deal with root causes. We treat symptoms.
That's it.
Write your prescription to treat the symptoms. That's when I realized that I have to be proactive. I have to do my own research and I have to find out, get to the root cause of the problem and do something myself. And I did. That's when I began my quest for knowledge in the area of health and wellness. And I've changed my diet and I changed a lot of things and I'm much healthier today than I was when I was 30, 40, 50 years old. But I had to do it. And a lot of stuff it's not costly. I mean, I don't have to buy a bunch of, I take certain supplements and all that now, but I fast 2, sometimes 3 days a week. And I read about it in the Bible, about fasting, but I never really paid much attention to it. There are some tremendous health benefits to fasting. And I did the research as to why. And so I know why it's beneficial to you. But I had to do this for myself because no one else was going to do it for me. I got tired. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I knew that I had to answer to God as to what I was doing for my body. And so I had to be proactive. And I share everything that I learned. I'll share it with anybody who's interested in knowing. But that's a part of my management of myself.
And then on this last one, or back on this lesson, where you was talking about the electromagnetic,
Yeah.
I was going through my mail, and there was a video came up, and it showed this guy here pulled into the service station, got out, minivan, put the gas, fill up. He walked around and looked like he was talking to his kids. His kids were inside texting and talking on the cell phone. And the car blew up. From the phone, magnetic from the phone.
Sure it does.
With them fumes.
Yeah.
Blew it.
People that know.
Knocked the man 50 feet from the car. He was just laying there, and the back end blew the hood off, the trunk off the car, and it burned it up. I guess the kids must have died. And then the caption said the kids was texting, talking on the phone when the fumes came in there.
Next time you go to the gas station,
Yes,
you
sir,
go
turn
to the
that phone.
pump, there's a sign that says,
Don't
Yeah,
have that
talking on
phone
phone.
Talking on the phone.
because there have been documented cases where, people talking on the phone and pumping gas and
Yeah.
a spark from that,
Smoking a cigarette.
yeah,
Can't tell them nothing of it.
Yeah.
and
A lot of time I tell them, a lot of times people have their phones up here. I tell them to take it out because
That's
that
not good.
radiation.
having it in your pocket, a lot of, they did studies where infertility is traced to having phones in your pocket, like he took his phone out of his pocket. Hey, when you learn better, you do better. But you're right. You have that thing right there, by your heart. And see, your heart has electrical. Your heart is blood circulation, and it has electricity, electrical pulse. So that interferes with all of that stuff. So yeah, phones could be to the back. See, the devices we are so dependent upon, cell phones, computers, routers, etc., give off radiation and electromagnetic energy that interferes with the function of our bodies. D. As good students, we must give due diligence to knowing what toxins, poisons we are exposed to and to make wise choices for our health. Why? Because we will give an account for it. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 talks about fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man, for every man shall give an account for everything he's done and every secret thing. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 10 says that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account for ourselves. And so who's responsible for your stewardship? You are. Number 2. All right, now we about to get deep now. Mental and emotional toxins. Movies, television, music, technology, etc. Much of the music, television shows, and movies that we watch are toxic to our mental and emotional well-being. They are devoid of God's value system. It is amazing how, in the name of tolerance, I cannot watch a television program without seeing some homosexual activity, couples or a man and a man and a woman and a woman. There's a show now called Living Biblically. You ever seen that?
I have.
That's the name of a sitcom.
Yeah, right.
Huh?
I want to see how they
But
that,
in entertainment now, they mock
Yeah.
God's value system.
Right.
is mocked
They're more likely.
in entertainment. I mean, look at the movies, you know. I mean, even television programs. I can't watch a television program without somebody, you know, jumping somebody's bones, either in the closet or, you know, at work or. I'm like, really? But it's so prevalent until it's accepted as normal. And so we become desensitized by it because we see it so much. It has lost its shock value. Something like that in the 50s and 60s, they would have been run off of TV, you know.
All the cursing and everything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh.
Wouldn't have none of that.
B, as Christians, we must be mindful of the mental diet we are exposed to and that of our families. You remember we read in Mark chapter 7 where Jesus was talking about the things that defile a person. The Pharisees were saying that your disciples defile themselves because they eat without washing their hands. And Jesus said, it's not what goes out, or it's not what you put in your body, but it's what goes out of the heart. Adultery, murders, lying, all these things come out of the heart. Well, guess what? In order for something to come out of your heart, something has to be put into your heart. Isn't that right?
Right.
We are fed a constant diet of stuff that's contrary to God's will, contrary to God's value system. And we have been fed that for so long till now people are acting like that. You look at these reality shows. These reality shows are just
I don't
ridiculous.
watch reality shows.
Because it's just
Huh?
TV there.
I don't watch
I don't watch it.
But the Real Housewives of, it started with Atlanta, now you got New York, New Jersey, Orange County, you know, DC, love and hip hop, you know.
No, I don't watch any of
This
that.
stuff is just so eroding to the moral fabric of our country. But guess what? Millions of people watch this stuff every time it comes on.
And talk about it at church.
Huh?
And talk about it at church.
And talk about it at church. And act like it. That's the part that's most disturbing. When something happens, they jumping across the table just like they were jumping across the table on the sitcom, you know, on the reality show. And acting
when
just like that.
I start watching a sitcom or whatever, and it's okay, but when it started getting too deep, I cut it loose. I used to watch Scandal when it first came on.
Yeah.
You know, at the second season, I let it alone. You know, it just when it's like, no, they
Matter of fact, the last episode ever of Scandal came on last night.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's
but all of these things are portrayed as normal, and people feast on, you know, they feed themselves on this kind of stuff, and they don't realize that subconsciously it's affecting their minds, how they think, how they see, how they react to things. Not everybody, but a lot of people.
Okay, we talk about the Scandal and the Housewives of Atlanta, but this is out here
Oh,
too.
absolutely.
And he using the
Well,
word.
that's
of
why I
God.
say spiritual. That's why I add spiritual in here. Because a lot of people think that because somebody's quoting the Bible or toting the Bible, you know, and saying, send me your money, you know, I'll send you a blessing in the mail or through the TV or something like that. And people are believing these things.
Yes, they
All of
are.
that's part of the toxins that we are exposed to. All right, y'all. Y'all ready to get deep? 3. Other toxins. Worry, fear, systemic racism, etc. A. We live in a world gripped by fear and worry. These emotions are contrary to faith. The Bible says that without faith, it is impossible to please God, right? It says that we walk by faith, not by sight, right? So why are so many people worried about so many things? Why are we so, if you ever watch the news is always talking about stuff that will cause you to fear or to worry.
not me.
Always. And here's the part that tickled me. The CBS Evening News comes on at 5:30. They have 28 minutes of bad news.
Yep.
And then at the end, they give you this one little 2 minutes of a feel-good story, you know,
Yeah,
on the
13
road.
does that.
You know, they give you a little. I'm like, how about reversing that? How about giving us 28 minutes of good news and give us 2 minutes of bad news?
Can't find that much good news.
That don't say
Okay.
Well,
So that's right.
don't make no money.
Brother Clyde Muse, way back in the 80s, Brother Clyde Muse from Oklahoma City, he did a revival in New Orleans, and he shared with us, he said there was a time when he entertained the idea of starting a newspaper that only reported good news. And he said an editor, a friend of his, told him, he said, if you want to waste your money, you pursue that venture. He said, bad news sells.
Exactly.
Good news don't sell.
Right.
People thrive on bad news.
Yes, they do.
And that's evident, but when you look at the news, most of what we see
It's bad.
is bad news. But guess what? Every day, people glued to the TV, watching that bad, and then they walk around in fear. You know, North Korea gonna send a missile. They're gonna strike us. You know, this group gonna do that and that. Walk around in fear and worry. Now, let me ask y'all a question. This is a personal question. Be honest. There's nobody here but us. What are you afraid of? What causes you to fear in this world? Anything in this world, anything that's going on in the world, whether it's politics, whether it's threats of, you know, nuclear attacks, whatever. What causes you to worry or to fear? Anybody?
Losing your life abruptly.
Hmm?
Losing your life abruptly.
Losing it to what?
Just losing
Real
your life
quickly, suddenly.
Sudden
suddenly,
abruptly.
abruptly.
Okay.
Abruptly.
And I use police officers as a you know a fear factor, fear tactic, because you never know. But you know, even then, you shouldn't have no fear. If you did,
Why does that? What's the difference in losing your life suddenly, or you know,
Getting sick.
yeah, and knowing you're gonna die 4 months from now, 2 years from now? What's the difference?
I think people just ain't prepared.
Yeah.
And they don't want to get prepared
Yeah,
either.
they ain't prepared to die yet.
I preached a sermon in 1995 entitled "Our God, He's Alive." When it comes to death, our God is alive. Death is a subject that conjures up fear in the hearts of most people. Why? Because death is an unknown element to many people. Many people don't understand or don't know what happens after death. And so people are afraid of what they don't know. People are paranoid by watching all of the brutal ways that people are dying. And we look at the news every day. We read the paper every day. And every day we see reports of someone being murdered. We hear of terrorist bombing, where people are burning down church buildings. They are bombing buildings filled with hundreds of people. And on Wednesday night, about 7:30 p.m., TWA Flight 800, Boeing 747, took off from John F. Kennedy Airport, bound for Paris, France. And over the Atlantic Ocean, this plane exploded and went down into the Atlantic Ocean. And here's the headline: 229 people died. Local, state, and federal agents or investigators have been working without end trying to find the answer as to why this happened. But I submit to you this morning that the most important question is not why it happened, although we need to know why it happened. But I believe that the most important question that we can ask is that of those 229 people, how many, if any, were prepared to die? It doesn't matter how you die. It does not matter when you die. What matters is that at the point of death, are you God? Is your relationship with God right? That's what matters. James chapter 1 verse 17, the Bible says that what is your life? It is as a vapor. It appears for a little while and then vanish away. The emphasis is not on, or should not be on, the span of our lives. It should not be on the accomplishments of our lives. But it should be on what our relationship is, and are we prepared to meet God in death? For the Christian, death is not to be feared, but anticipated. Why? Because once we pillow our heads in death, all of the suffering, all of the pain, all of the trials that we experience from day to day will be over. And to demonstrate how important an event the death of a child of God is, the Bible says in Luke chapter 22 verse 16 that at the point of death a child of God is escorted by an angelic escort into Abraham's bosom. Now here's the point that I'm trying to make. He says that Lazarus, when he died, the angels carried him into Abraham's bosom. One angel was enough to destroy 70,000 men in 2 Samuel 24, 1 Chronicles 21. One angel was enough to smote down 185,000 of Sennacherib's Assyrian soldiers. One angel was enough to strike down King Herod. But the Bible says when the child of God dies, that he's given an angelic escort by plurality of angels. Brothers and sisters, that's a special event. When God sends more than one of his angels to escort us. So when a child of God dies, that's a special event. There's no need for fear. We just must be prepared. And in Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 through 13, that's what the Lord talked about when he talked about the parable of the 10 virgins. You see, the lesson was that you need to get ready and stay ready so that when the Lord comes, you will be ready. And you know what else that tells me? You can get ready and not stay ready. And consequently not be ready when the Lord comes. So don't think that because we're in the Lord's church that we are right. You have to work faithful and be faithful up to and into death in order to be escorted. Death is an appointment that all of us must keep. But not only are we appointed to die, the Bible says after that comes the judgment.
And one of the points in that sermon was, when it comes to death, our God is alive. At that time, there was I think it was United Airlines Flight 800. It was a plane that had went down in the Atlantic Ocean and 237 people died. And I remember I held up that article, the headlines, and showed it to the congregation I was preaching to. And I said, people look at this and they said how tragic this is because all these people died that way. And I said the true tragedy is, and the real question is, not why they died or why they died this way, but were they prepared to die? That's the question. That's the real question. I have done several eulogies, and every time I do a eulogy, I hold up the program. It has the picture of the person, it has the date they were born, date they died. I said, that date is not important. That date is not important. What's important is the dash in between, because the dash in between represents the span of your life that you have to prepare for eternity. Remember Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 25 the parable of the talent. The 10 virgins. 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. Why were the 5 foolish? The 5 were foolish because they didn't have enough oil. They weren't prepared when the bridegroom came. They got prepared in the beginning, but they weren't prepared in the end when he finally came.
The lesson in that parable is to get ready and stay ready, so that whenever the Lord comes, you'll be ready. That's the question.
Exactly.
We have to live each day as though it was our last day, because you never know when your last day is. It doesn't matter how you die. It doesn't matter if someone comes and blow your head off with a shotgun, or if you go to sleep and never wake up. How you die is irrelevant. When you die is irrelevant. What matters is at the point of death, are you prepared to face God in judgment? That's what's important. And that's how we have to look at life that way. We have to live our life. We have to manage our lives that way. So every day we have to personally say to ourselves, okay, when a situation arises that's going to cause you to react to it, that's something you need to think about.
Yeah.
But my point is this: you have to be prepared at all times, because you don't know when your time is coming. I don't know. I don't want to know when my day is. I don't want to know. But what I do want to do is be prepared every day, just in case today is the day. You see? C. Systemic racism.
What is that?
Under B.
I know, but what's the systemic?
Number
what
3,
that
other
means?
toxins, worry, fear, systemic racism.
Widespread.
Yes. B rather. Systemic racism is a system designed to promote racial and social economic inequality. Huh? The documentary 13th on Netflix I was telling y'all about before class started outlined and demonstrated the systemic racism that is still prevalent in America this day. Before I go any further, I want to show y'all, this is the trailer to that documentary. If you ever get an opportunity, I want you to watch. I'm going to show you 2 videos. One is the trailer for this documentary, 13th, and another one is an episode last week on this show called For the People. It's a court show, and it's about these young lawyers, and court cases
That's
and
a new
stuff.
show, isn't it? For the People, that's a new show.
For the People.
Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to watch
Okay, the clip that I'm going to show you was an episode last week where this black judge, earlier in his career, he sentenced a young black guy to prison. The mandatory sentence for the crime that he committed was 10 years. The crime didn't fit the punishment, but because he was bound by, law, he took an oath to uphold the Constitution, he had to sentence this young man. This young man died in prison. And so in this clip, there was another man that's coming before him where he refused to make the same mistake with this guy. He didn't want to, enforce that law, and he was willing to step down as a judge, and someone had to talk to him and tell him, you do more good on the bench than you do off the bench. So this clip is him sentencing this guy, but the deep part is his explaining why he had to sentence him and how unjust the laws were that he had to uphold in the sentencing. But first, let's look at the trailer for this documentary, 13th.
1 out of 4 human beings with their hands on bars, shackled, in the world are locked up here in the land of the free.
Khalif Browder was walking home from a party when he was stopped by police.
Then they said, we're going to take you to the precinct, and most likely we're going to let you go home. And then I never went home.
The 13th Amendment to the Constitution makes it unconstitutional for someone to be held as a slave. There are exceptions, including criminals.
The loophole was immediately exploited. What you got after that was a rapid transition to a mythology of black criminality.
Some people got the real problem. Animals, beasts that needed to be controlled.
You better believe it.
I'm only human.
It became virtually impossible for a politician to run and appear soft on crime.
The kinds of kids that are called super predators.
Millions of dollars will be allocated for prison and jail facilities.
3 strikes and you are out.
It was an enormous burden on the black community, but it also violated a sense of core fairness.
The states were required to keep these prisons filled, even if nobody was committing a crime.
It's so difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized.
The focus is on taking people from prison, putting them in community corrections, parole and probation.
How much progress is it really if now there's a private company making money off the GPS monitor?
We now have more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves back in the 1850s.
We are the products of the history that our ancestors chose. Products of that set of choices that we have to understand in order to escape from it. We should go looking somewhere high.
I'm only human after all, don't put the blame on me.
The defendant, please rise. Mr. Puente, you have been found guilty of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. This was a nonviolent offense. You've been honest and forthright in this courtroom. You've shown remorse. As far as I can tell, you are a decent young man who found himself in a bad situation. I am not from New York, but I am a New Yorker. I came here on a Greyhound bus from Gaston, Alabama in 1965. This city has changed substantially since then. There are no cars in Times Square. Brooklyn is filled with high-rises. Black folks are a minority in Harlem these days. Crime is at an all-time low in Manhattan. But no one ever seems to ask the question they should be asking in between their Broadway shows and swanky dinners. At what cost? Here, from this bench, listening to cases just like yours, I see the cost. The cost looks me in the eye. The cost runs deep. It shatters lives, splinters families, destroys futures. It is unrepentant. This is rightly a bitter pill to swallow, Mr. Puente. But you are the cost. Julian Barley is the cost. We are cannibalizing a generation of New Yorkers. But this is happening all over the country. Low-level, nonviolent crimes that trigger disproportionate mandatory minimum sentences. And I'm part of the problem. I have not spoken out against these sentences. I have failed you. I failed Julian Barley. I failed thousands of other underrepresented people. I have not done my duty as a New Yorker, as a Black American, as a father, to protect people who look like me, walk the same streets as I do, from laws that are not designed to rehabilitate, but to destroy. My hands are reluctantly and unwillingly tied in this situation. I have no choice but to sentence you, Mr. Puente, to 10 years in federal prison. I have no business asking anything of you, Mr. Puente, but I would ask you to take a long look at your family on your way out of this courtroom. Lock that picture in your head and do not let go of it. Hold on to it. That is hope when there's no hope left. Please, do not let anyone take that away from you. One last thing, Mr. Puente. I'm so very sorry.
But I saw that on last weekend on Stars. Yeah. Stars.
The,
Oh, okay. I think I got Stars on my case.
what this judge was talking about, and you saw they kept showing clips of him. He went to this house and knocked on his door, and the black lady answered. That was the mother of the boy who he sentenced before, who died. And those pictures he was looking at was the pictures of that boy. And at the end, you heard him, he apologized to the boy's mother, but he said his hands were tied because he was bound by law. But his point was that the speech that he made was showing how unjust the law is, and how he hadn't spoken about against an unjust law. And that's what the documentary 13th is about. It's showing how, you know, the system in terms of how disproportionate number of African American men and women are incarcerated, and that was by design. You know, it went through the whole history of the quote unquote war on drugs in the 80s, and going back to Nixon, and how it was discovered that these were actually things that were designed to target young black men and incarcerate them, and how that incarceration is big business. A lot of people, and it's the new cotton fields is what they called it. Slavery is abolished, but the new cotton fields is the prison, because they have all these young black men and women in prison, and they're out here working in the fields for free. You see? So slavery, we just call it by another name now. But it's powerful. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. In the case of For the People, the young guy who had the sentence of 10 years, this is what I say all the time. We give them the bullets. We give them the ammunition to do this. This young man here, earlier in the episode, he did what he did because he was trying to make some quick money. Somebody came up to him and gave him a bag, you know, with something in it. He didn't know what was in it, you know, because he was, and it gave him, you know, I forget how much it was, $1,500, something like that, to go, you know, deliver this bag somewhere. But he wanted to make this quick money to get something for his sister. And because he got caught with this bag, he got to face 10 years. But he made the choice to take this bag that cost him these 10 years. That young black guy, he made a choice to do something that caused him to be put into prison. And we do this all the time. You know, we do things and then we cry about the system being rigged, and it is, about, you know, the injustice in the you know, judicial system, and there is, but we keep giving people ammunition. We keep doing these stupid things that causes us to be targeted. You know, now granted, some people are targeted for having done nothing at all, but those who do things, we give people ammunition to do stuff like that. If I go into the store and steal a honey bun because I'm hungry, it's a legitimate need, but I got caught stealing. Now I'm serving 50 years in prison for stealing a honey bun.
You're right.
I'd rather go out and sell some bottles. You remember back in the day, used to sell bottles for a nickel, you know, and earn some money to buy me a honey bun. But my point is this: if you know things are stacked against you, don't give people a reason to lock you up. We keep doing these stupid things. We already have a target on our back, and we do stuff that's gonna, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But we are, that people dang their carrot in front of you, you know, get the bling, get the money, and so you go out and you do all of these foolish things to get that money, and that costs you so much more than that money that you just did that for. It's just crazy.
That's just a choice that they make.
It's choices. It's personal choices.
They think they know so much.
You know, everything is
But
quick,
we do have
fast.
some in there that hadn't done anything.
Huh?
Yeah, he said that. Yeah.
What?
We do have some in
In
there.
prison that hasn't done, and that's right.
Some people that
Problem for that kid being at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people.
Now he had to go and face this boy's mother, and that lady who was sitting, that was the boy's mother whose son he sentenced to 10 years, who died in prison. You know, and he had to look at the heartache on this boy's mother's, you know, because he knew that the system wasn't fair and equitable, but being bound by, you know, an oath that he took to uphold the law, he had no choice but to do
what he had to do.
It's a catch-22 situation.
So now, I mean, you know, like, but when you in there, aren't we still under the judge's mercy?
But the judge is still bound by law, though.
But he has some leeway that
he has some, yeah, he can.
That he can use to not send you to bypass.
Well, if you watch that whole episode, one of the things that went on in that episode was he was trying to get the prosecutors to, I think he got caught with 57 grams of cocaine.
Okay.
By law, anything over 50 grams is a 10-year
I understand that.
mandatory minimum sentence. He was trying to get the prosecution to bring the count down below 50 so that he could exercise, you know, some leniency and not impose such a hard sentence. The prosecutor refused to do it. You know, so because he refused to do it, he had no choice because the law says anything over 50 grams, 10 years minimum. So his hands were tied. But it was deep. If you ever want to catch that episode on demand or whatever.
And the only way to do that is to do it, change the law.
Huh?
And
I think that's part of what he was talking about when he said, I have not done.
Michael, 13th is on demand?
That 13th
No, 13th is on Netflix.
Okay.
I see you may be able to find this episode of For the People on demand.
Oh, okay.
The 13th Amendment is really specifically is geared against us.
Well, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. Yeah. But there are clauses in there that was used, that was exploited.
That Jim Crow put in there.
Well, that's what the documentary is about. It's about how those clauses were exploited and used. You know. Anyway, let's. So we need to wrap this up. D. The current administration has given racism that once was hidden license to come out from the shadows. I don't know if you realize it, but when Trump started running for president, campaigning, and since he's become president, hate crimes have risen. You know, Klan activity, neo-Nazi activity, and a lot of these, hate groups have. And now they feel like it's okay. We got somebody in leadership who feels the same way we do. So, all right. Note, and this is closing up. We are not called to challenge every injustice in the world. We are called to make disciples. That's what I was talking about earlier. It is through discipleship that the hearts of mankind is changed. The heart of the human problem is the problem of the human heart. Our responsibility is to share the love, hope, and salvation that comes with being in covenant relationship with God through His Son, Jesus. Through His Son. Jesus has the power to change hearts. And see, that's what this is all about. I don't care how many laws you change. You can change the laws, but you can't legislate a person's heart. It's a person's heart that's the problem. You can find ways to get around the law or even disregard the law altogether just because the law says, it's unlawful for me to shoot Robert and kill him. But that doesn't legislate that I hate him.
Right.
That I want to kill him.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Man's law doesn't legislate heart. God does that. And God is the only one who can change a person's heart. And until we change people's hearts, it doesn't matter how many jails we build, how many programs we institute, how many laws we enact. None of that's going to change anything until man's heart changes. Because that is the root cause of the problem. Building prisons and all of these things, that's dealing with the symptoms. But the root cause is heart trouble. And only Jesus can fix that. And so our responsibility as disciples of Christ is to bring people to Christ. is to bring them to the one who can fix and change their hearts. Because if you change a person's heart, it changes action. The action will change automatically, inevitably, because of the heart change. You see?
Right.
Conclusion. Well, second paragraph under the note. We will all be judged with every secret thing. Many secrets lie in the hearts of men, but they are known by God and will be judged at the appointed time. If you only knew how many secrets there is in this world, in this government, in people's hearts, in families. There are so many secrets. And we try to keep the secrets, we try to hide the secrets, but they're in full view to God. God knows all of it. And when we stand before God in judgment, all of the secrets coming out. You see what I'm saying? Like I said, I could be sitting right here, you know, and laughing and clowning with Tyrone, and in my heart, I could not stand him. I could hate him. That's a secret. You see? Now, if I did something to, you know, to demonstrate my hatred towards him, like trying to undermine and, you know, cut him down and talk about him to other people, that would reveal what's in my heart. But if I don't do things like that, you would never know if I had that in my heart. But God knows.
Right.
God knows when you're mad because you ain't bringing no more chicken.
Oh no, I ain't mad, bro. Disappointed, yeah. Mad, no. Not mad about that. Oh, I just be teasing about that chicken.
But you know,
I just be glad to see you, bro. That's all real. I'll be glad, and I love to mess with you because I know you can take it. Everybody can't take it. So that's why I mess with you. What you say, sis?
No, I was just gonna say what you said is so correctly right, and you can teach all you want. You know, trying to encourage and tell family and friends about the Lord and what He'll do and what He is to you. But until that person accepts and wants to make a change in his or her life, you can hang it up. It's got to come from them. It's just like a drunk, DWI drunk person, alcoholic. Unless he comes to that time in his life that he don't want to be an alcoholic anymore and he needs help or she needs help, it ain't gonna help.
And see, it's clearly taught in the scriptures. The parable of the sower teaches that. What's going on in somebody's heart. We don't know that. That's not our place. Let me read this conclusion, and then we'll close out. Conclusion.
Because we are in the world, we are exposed to all the toxins that are also in the world. The advantage we have is that we are insulated by the Word of God, covered by the blood of Jesus, and sanctified by the Holy Spirit. Therefore, we must not be in fear of the state of this world, but be thermostats we were called to be the thermostats we were called to be, and impact this world with our salt and light, and with the gospel message of hope in Christ Jesus.
Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 through 16 said that for us not to murmur, you know, amongst one another, but to shine in the midst of this dark world, to shine as lights, to be that lily in the cesspool. That's what we're called to be. And the way we do that is by demonstrating, by letting the light of God's word, the love of God, the light of Christ be reflected in our lives. That's what this is all about. You know, we can't do anything about the hearts of people, all the corruption and the hatred and all that stuff. No. You can't do anything about that, but point them to Christ. That's right. But share God's word and hope that and pray that their soul is fertile enough to receive it and allow God to allow that seed to germinate and to produce fruit. But that's the extent of our responsibility. And so I don't fear all the craziness going on. And you know what? Perspective is such a key. I'll give you an example about perspective. I had cataract surgery in my right eye last year. In my right eye, I see everything is clear as a bell. In my left eye, everything is dingy and yellow. So if I walked around with my good eye covered and I'm looking at life through this eye, everything is dingy, everything is yellow and blurry. If I walked around looking at life through this eye, everything is clear and looks good. That's the way it is with our view of life. If you walk around in this world and you look at life full of worry, full of fear, full of all these things that are contrary to faith, you'd be stressed out all the time, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But if you walked around looking at life through the eyes of faith, God is in control. I know it's a mess down here, but I'm covered by the blood of Christ. God is the sovereign ruler of the universe. He has everything under control, and everything that's happening, He's allowing it to happen. I may not understand why, but I know that He's in control, and I know that He's not going to allow anything to happen to me unless it's His will for it to happen to me.
Right.
And if He allows it to happen to me, He has a purpose for it. You see? If I went through life with that perspective, it changes how I interpret stuff that go on around me. You see? So perspective is key. It's crucial. And that's why you always hear me talk about we need to have a divine perspective on this life. We need to look at life through the lens of faith. Because if you don't, you walk around stressed out all the time, worried all the time, fearful all the time about all of this crazy stuff that's going on around us. I don't worry about none of this stuff that's going on around us. If it happens, it happens. And my job is to be prepared if the worst happens.
Right.
That's my priority.
That's right.
And that's it.
That's it.
Any questions, comments, closing, anything?